Hello, welcome to This Takes the Cake podcast. This week, we'll be joining Paige from Pyrotex. I'll start off by just introducing myself really quickly for those who don't know me. I'm Michelle, and I'm the Dallas-Fort Worth owner of Stunning and Brilliant Events. I'm originally from Chicago, but now I live in Dallas and doing weddings here. So let's go ahead and toss it over to Paige. Paige, why don't you tell us a little bit more about you and Pyrotex?
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me today. So Pyrotex started in 1979. We are actually the oldest Texas-based professional firework display company. And our first client was the Bee Gees in 1979. I talk to students often and I get these blank looks on their faces because unless I start singing Staying Alive, they have no idea who I'm talking about for the Bee Gees.
So funny.
We so it's starting to become an older audience that understands who the Bee Gees are. But we were a pyrotechnician company. Randy Beckham actually founded it, and he, like I said, started with the Bee Gees, but worked for Casey and the Sunshine Band and Styx, and then Lizzie and Reba McEntire with her first band, and Lionel Richie when he was with the Commodores. So all of these old bands all through the 80s and 90s. And in the 90s, we did start outdoor 4th of July type aerial fireworks. And that was the point that we actually moved out to a little town called Leonard. We had started the company in Carrollton, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas-Fort Worth, for those not in the area. And Randy moved out to Leonard. We are on 80 acres of cows and fireworks living in harmony out there. And Pyrotex has been there ever since. I started with him in 2011. I had actually met Randy through a networking event, and he hired me on as his sales girl. I am the only salesperson for the company, so my title went from sales girl to sales princess to sales queen, because because when there's nowhere else you can go, you just have to get creative with your title.
Yeah.
And so he actually passed away in 2017 after various illnesses, and he willed the company to me, the general manager, and the production manager. So we are all co-owners, and then his wife also has a portion of the company ownership as well. And we just continue his legacy. So I'm still the only salesperson for the company. I'm also a licensed pyrotechnician as well. I have my firework pyrotechnic operator license, which allows me to be a lead license for big 4th of July type shows. I have my special effects operator license, which is more for close proximity and indoor pyrotechnics. And I have my flame effects operator license as well. So these are all licenses that we receive through the state of Texas. And then I am also licensed to drive the pyro. So I have a special commercial driver's license with hazmat endorsement so that I can drive the fireworks as well. And that's something that's a little bit different than from our company than other companies is, sometimes there's an owner or a president or someone who runs the company, and that's what they do. They run the company. But for us, all of us not only run the company in the day-to-day operations, but we also train our employees, but we're also leads on the show as well. So we are out in the field with our clients, with our planners, with our venues, and making sure that everything runs smoothly there as well.
I love how involved you are with the company, and it was evident from the first day I met you. Why don't we talk a little bit more about how we met? Do you remember?
I think it was probably the wedding at Hillside. Was it the wedding at Hillside?
It was either the wedding at Hillside, or I was volunteering to help set up an event for, I think, one of the local caterers.
Nice.
And you were there setting up, and I didn't know who you were, but I had heard your name. So when you introduced yourself to me, you're like, "Oh, I'm Paige from Pyrotex." I was like, like because social media makes you feel like you really know a person even though you don't because you follow them all the time. I was like, oh, Paige. I'm like, I know everything about her and her company. I'm like so excited to meet her. And in my head, I was like, okay, play it cool. Okay, how
Oh, that's
to meet you?
nice.
So we met, I think that was the first time we met. And then yes, working at events at Hillside.
Yes, definitely. Yes, I'm very involved in the industry, across the industry. I've been on a board of directors for at least 7 of the events industry associations. I'm currently on the board of directors for 2 at the same time right now. So I am definitely out and about
Yes.
anywhere and everywhere.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about Pyrotex. You went through a little bit about all the certifications, licenses that you have, and how involved you are with the company. Can you give us a rundown of all the services you do and events that you cover?
Definitely. So, of course, we do outdoor aerial 4th of July type shows. We do those all over Texas. We actually used to be an international pyrotechnic company. So, we've shot shows in London, Tokyo, Dubai, all over the world. But now, especially since COVID, there's a lot of parties happening here in the DFW area. So we kind of stick close to home with our 4th of July shows as well. And so we do the aerial shows. We also do indoor pyrotechnics, close proximity pyrotechnics, what people call the cold spark units. We don't like to call them cold because they're not, but we do offer those as well, and flame effects, of course, and we can specialize different things. We've been in movies, TV, commercials, theatrical productions where we've had to create explosions or Lumiere's hands for Beauty and the Beast, or explode the chandelier for Phantom of the Opera. So there's different things that we can create as well and custom build for clients. And so that's fun when we get to do something a little bit different. And then we have non-pyro effects as well. We have our dancing on a cloud machine, which is really popular for weddings, but we have used it a few times for corporate events to either reveal a product or reveal a band that's coming out on stage. We also offer confetti cannons and bubble machines, because who doesn't like a good bubble?
Yeah, bubbles are fun, especially when that fire ban is in, which we talked a little bit about. But yeah, bubbles, confetti cannons. I didn't know that. So you guys do that for like grand exits or large
We
events?
do. It's actually mainly for indoors. For the last dance, we've had it for dances in between as well. But it's kind of a fun, like, this is the last dance of the night. Here's the final celebration. Very few venues do allow the confetti inside because it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes.
But but for the venues that do allow it, it's a fun little addition. We have used them for departures. We actually do carry water soluble confetti, which melts with rain. So we've had that for outdoors for departures. And so it's a kind of an easy cleanup. It'll melt in a couple of days with water. We can also do dried rose petals as well for outdoors. And so, yeah, we have had it for a few departures in the past as well.
Okay, I love it. I thought I knew everything about all the services you offer, but I just learned a little bit more. Um, let's talk about fireworks specifically for weddings. Can you share a little bit about the logistics and planning that goes into that? Obviously, it's a huge display, and I just reach out to you and I'm like, "Hey, Paige, someone wants fireworks for their wedding," and then you make everything happen behind the scenes. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what happens.
So, when the client contacts us, the first thing we're going to ask is, what is your venue? Not only because there are certain locations that will not allow fireworks. There are certain cities that only allow city sanctioned events. So, first and foremost, we have to make sure that what you're asking for can be accomplished. We also need to make sure that your venue does have the space that's required. We have a lot of people that call us and want things in downtown Dallas. And we do shows in downtown Dallas. We have a great venue called Arlington Hall that's right off Turtle Creek Boulevard. And we were able to fire in the park right across the street. So we can do them inside the city limits. We've closed streets. We had a wedding at the Omni that we actually closed down Olive Street and fired out of the middle of the street. So it is possible. It's just sometimes people call me and they're in some high-rise hotel that is surrounded by office buildings, and there's legitimately nowhere that we can fire in that area. So we, first and foremost, have to find out if we can do it, if we can make what they want to happen. And then, of course, the permits. Our pricing actually includes all of the permit fees, the fire marshal fees, and so that could be different for different cities. So we have to know that before we go in to give pricing. At that point, I send pricing to either the planner or the client, whoever's calling me for the quote. And once they approve the quote and we know what we're doing and where we're doing it, the next question is the logistics for their wedding. Timing. What is their timeline look like for the wedding? Most of our cities, at least for the aerial fireworks shows, will cut us off at 10 o'clock p.m. Just to be nice neighbors more than anything. So we have to make sure that that will fit in the timeline so that people can come out and watch it before 10 o'clock p.m. And of course, that also dictates the time of year. So if you're getting married in November or December, we could shoot as early as 6 or 6:30. So you have all of that time between 6 and 10 that you can play with. Versus if you're getting married in July, you pretty much have between 9:30 and 10, and that's your limit. So have to find out timeline. If we're doing indoor effects, we have to have your site plan so that we know that we have the safety distance required by the state of Texas to do the pyrotechnic effect indoors as well. And then we start thinking about the design of the show. So we ask the wedding colors because we like to try to put that in if we can. We ask, of course, the song. If you're having an aerial fireworks show, we do choreograph the show to music. And so we work with your DJ and your planner to coordinate the cue for that to start the show. And so we will ask you your favorite song. We have had anything and everything as far as songs go. We actually had a groom that wrote the song one time and he sent it to us. Really anything that we can pull off of the internet, we can get as well off of iTunes. But also we've actually done a fireworks show to it was like a stomach, like a Pepto-Bismol jingle or something like that back in the past. So any song you want to use, we can definitely use for your show. And then we ask you if you have any sort of theme. So we've had different things that we try to roll in. We had one show where it was actually the father of the bride wanted to surprise the bride. And she was supposed to be getting married at Disney World. And this was during COVID, so they couldn't take everybody to Disney. So they actually had the show here. And we recreated one of the fireworks shows as much as we could in the limited space that we had for that event. And then just actually on Saturday, we had a couple whose last name was going to be Van Meter. And so the show actually started with 2 firework boxes that were angled out to make a V. So it was just little touches that we try to put in that makes it special for the client.
Oh, that's
And once we have all of that, once we get closer to the wedding date, we coordinate with the planner, of course, to make sure that we have the proper contact information, that they have the contact information for our lead pyrotechnician. Our service also includes contacting the photographer and videographer to make sure that they know what's happening and where it's happening and how to get the best picture or video. And then, of course, working with the DJ to make sure that they have the soundtrack as well. And then, day of, we show up a couple hours before the show is set to fire. We set it all up, we fire the show, we clean it all up, and we quietly go away. So people have told us that we're like little ninjas sometimes because they don't realize we were there and they don't realize we had left.
yeah.
So and that's what we want. We want it to be flawless, not only for our clients, but also for the planners. Y'all have enough to do at the wedding. You don't want to be chasing around all of your vendors as well.
No, I love that. I remember the first few times I worked with you, you were very detailed in what you asked, and you paid attention to the timeline. So it's great because as planners, we put so much time and effort into the timeline. So the fact that you read it and then you asked questions that I maybe not have thought of to ensure that it runs seamlessly, I really appreciated that.
Yeah, thank you.
So talking about planners, how far should planners or couples reach out to you to get their fireworks booked or their indoor cold sparks booked or any of those special effects?
So, if you have any type of pyrotechnic effect, whether indoors or outdoors, we do have to obtain permits. Some of our cities are fairly quick about the process. We can push things through in a couple of weeks, but some of our cities require a full 30-day process. Like McKinney is one of our cities that they do have a full 30-day process. If you don't turn it in before 30 days before the event, it's not going to happen. Same thing, city of Dallas. They like to have 30 days, but if you submit the paperwork within 16 days of the event, you get an extra $650 fine to push that permit through for the city of Dallas. So you want to make sure that you reach out to us at least a month and a half beforehand. That way, we have time to complete our paperwork, complete the show design before we send everything over to the fire marshal for the permits.
Okay, that's good to know. Speaking of timeline, you talked a little bit about when the best moments for fireworks or any of those special effects are. For example, the grand exit, first dance. Personally, what's your favorite that you've seen so far?
So, first of all, a departure we've had as an arrival. So, if you want to have a sparkle fountain departure, but you don't have the right timing or you don't have the right logistics for how everybody's going to leave, you can also do the departure as you arrive at the beginning of the night. So there's no rhyme or reason, except for, of course, the 10 o'clock p.m. aerial fireworks show.
Yeah.
And some people want to have that aerial fireworks show for their departure. But to tell you the truth, most of your people, especially your older crowd, once they get cake, they are going to be out the door, especially if you're in one of these venues that is out in the country. They're going to eat their cake and they're going to leave. So if you wait to have, especially an aerial fireworks show for your departure, you might have 20 people watching it if all of your guests are an older crowd and depart early. So we always tell people for the aerial show, do it around the cake cutting time because that portion of the night is a little awkward. So the bride and groom or the couple has to cut the cake and they do it for the pictures and they make that one little slice and they throw it in each other's face or whatever they're going to do. And then there has to be time that somebody else actually cuts the cake so that all of the people can have a slice of cake for the guests. And this takes a little bit of time, unless you have that sheet cake in the back or something. So we always tell people at that point, send everybody outside, do the fireworks show, give those people time to cut the cake, everyone can come back in. The cake is ready to eat, and that also kicks off the dance party portion of the evening. And it just flows really well. That being said, it also depends on your venue. We had one venue where the firing site that we had was the complete opposite end of where the reception hall was. Luckily, this was a November wedding, so we could push the fireworks show a little bit earlier in the evening. And so they had their ceremony. They came out of the chapel, which was near the firing site. They saw the fireworks show, and then they went in for the reception.
So many.
So it just kind of, it just kind of depends on the logistics of your event.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about restrictions and regulations that couples should be aware of? You touched upon lately one thing that I remember from earlier, cold sparks and having a certain distance between the sparks and then nearby tables, the cake table, like anything like that.
Yes.
I am actually working with a couple that do want cold sparks, but they have a very small space indoors. And so we have to do it outdoors. And so they're a little disappointed by that. But what are some restrictions that you have?
So, first of all, the term cold sparks is a misnomer. It was something that the person who originally sold them decided was a cool marketing ploy. So, cold spark units actually won't fire until they're at least 500 degrees, and they can burn up to 1200 degrees. So, definitely not cold. They're actually the same temperature as indoor sparkle fountains, the ones that we use for the departure outside now. But we use those for years and years and years indoors. They're the same temperature, the same regulation through the state. And so both of them have to have all of the permits, fire marshal, an FEO licensed pyrotechnician on site in order to fire them legally in Texas. So that's that's number one that I want to get out there. Just because people still argue with me on this fact. And I just saw a video actually the other day where a bride was walking past a cold spark unit, and you can tell the difference. I mean, there's obviously a higher quality, just like anything. There's a higher quality effect that you can purchase, and there's the ones that you can get from Alibaba Express. So there's definitely a difference. Yeah, it's sad. But there's definitely a difference in the quality of the product that vendors use. However, the cold spark units can still set things on fire. I get asked all the time, so this is the not real fire. And I'm like, well, no, it is. It's still, it's all real fire. So in this video, the bride was walking past the cold spark unit. She had a bouquet that had pampas grass in it. Pampas grass and cold sparks do not mix. And so her bouquet caught on fire. Instead of just dropping it, which, I mean, who knows what that would have done with the venue, but instead of just dropping it, she tried to shake it a whole bunch. And flames are flying everywhere, and trying to catch her dress on fire and things like that. And there were comments in there that said, oh, they should have used cold sparks. Well, guess what? They were. It was just the fact that the person who was using it, the vendor who was using it, did not think to tell the client all of these regulations and instructions on how to use them safely. So you do have to make sure that guests are at least 15 feet away. The table doesn't have to be 15 feet away. So if you have a table that you really, really want right next to the dance floor, make sure that that is your bridal party. And that whenever your bridal party comes in and they're introduced, they can stand around the outside of the room so that they are still the 15 feet away. So there are certain things like that that we can do to adjust if we need to. But flower arrangements, we want to make sure that flower arrangements are not too close because they will catch on fire. We want to make sure that all of the draping, all of the tablecloths have their fire retardant certificate to make sure that they don't catch on fire. And and the bride and groom themselves, especially the brides. If you have a big poofy dress, you want to make sure that you stay towards the other end of the dance floor when you're doing your dance. And we'll do that. We'll tell the couple beforehand, make sure that you stand here or use the chandelier as a visual point for your dance. But sometimes they get lost in their love for each other. And we have to sit there on the side and go like this, to kind of hope that we catch one of their eyes and tell them to move a little bit farther away before we can pop them. But again, some people don't understand why we need that. And so even though we get the floor plan, we'll show up on the day of and the space is not there that we need. And in that situation, unfortunately, it's a case of either the tables need to move or we might need to cut some effects or not do them at all. So that's something that that is a risk that people take if the rules aren't followed.
And so, what are some of the safety measures that you and your team take to ensure that nothing goes wrong, that everyone is safe when you're setting up, say, a fireworks display?
So, first things is always to make sure that everybody knows what's going on. And I know that some of these things, especially aerial firework displays, are sometimes surprises for the couple or for the guests. And so, we just want to make sure that there is some sort of barrier between the show and the guests, or a police officer. You always have a police officer on site for a wedding that is the bar cop, what I like to call the bar cop. And we just ask that person comes outside to make sure that they stand between us and the guests, especially for departures. Departures, the end of the night, the guests have been having a little too much fun, and they just don't understand why they can't run after the car at the end of the evening. So sometimes I have to tell the guests, you love the couple, right? You want to make sure you don't ruin their surprise, right? And make sure that they stay where they're supposed to stay. For the indoor effects, of course, we are trained and licensed. We're licensed through the state of Texas, which requires a test, background check, fingerprinting through the ATF. In order to get licensed to do an aerial fireworks show, we also have to work 5 what are called 1.3G shows, which are the big 4th of July type effects. And so we have to do that before we are licensed. With Pyrotex, we actually have an annual training. We call it Pyro Camp. And we train all of our employees. They are our employees. We don't use any contract labor. So they are all trained annually. They're all background checked, drug tested. And we make sure that they know that everyone on the crew knows what they're doing before they arrive. In the state of Texas, legally, you only have to have that one licensed pyrotechnician on the crew. Everyone else can be his neighbor, his friends, someone who just wanted to blow stuff up that night. Joe Schmo off the street. But with our company, we don't work that way. Everyone does have to be trained annually. And if you don't come to Pyro Camp, you don't work that year. So there are different, everything changes. Obviously, technology changes so quickly these days that we have to make sure that everyone is up to date with everything, all of the risks, all of the products each year. And so that's one of the things that we do that's a little bit different than other companies. But also, especially with the cold spark units, I often send, DJs and bands and people who are just wanting to use these effects for their own company. I will send them the study materials. I will send them how to get licensed because I just want them to be licensed. I don't care that they're going to be my competitor now with the spark units. I just want them to be able to do it legally. So getting licensed, but also the spark units come with a video, an educational video and a booklet that explains how far away you're supposed to be, how, where you have to have people stand, where you want flowers to be. All of this is included in their packet that comes whenever you buy the machine. So, watching that, making sure that you understand all the risks that are inherent with a firework display.
I know I always get nervous when I'm working with a DJ who I've never worked with before, and they have cold sparks listed under their add-ons. And I'm just like, I usually recommend that clients go through someone that I trust, that I know is licensed in setting it off. So that always makes me nervous. But it's good to know that there are at least instructions or some kind of a little bit of guidance there. But yeah, I definitely would
Definitely.
recommend.
Well,
I would
and
recommend going with you.
as a planner or as a venue, I've had venues call me a lot and say, this DJ just showed up and he has these spark units and I know what they are and I know what they're going to do. And I'm telling him no because I've already asked him. I mean, these are my venues that know me and have heard my spiel. So they're like, I've already asked him for his license. I've already asked him for the permits. He, of course, doesn't have any of that. And so I'm arguing with him about it. And to me, that seems odd because even if I were to come in and say, I've got all of this, here's the information, if the venue says no, it's no. I've had a dancing on a cloud effect, not even a pyrotechnic effect. It's just dry ice and water. And I had been working with a venue for over a year to get it approved. And I showed up the day of. The girl that I had been working with at the venue had been let go about a week before. And so the new person who was there didn't understand the effect and wouldn't let me do it. So I said sorry to the couple and I walked out the door. I wasn't going to argue about it. I mean, I tried to show the emails where it was approved. They didn't accept that. And so I walked out the door. So that's what I don't understand when the venues call me and they're like, they won't take no for an answer. Like, it's your venue. If it's no, it's no. Like, if you're saying no, it's no. But they get this all the time. And it's so easy to be licensed. It's super, super easy to be licensed. And it's something super simple to get a license, to get the permits to do these things legally. It's just they don't want to spend the extra money that it requires, the extra time and the extra money that it requires to do that. So as a planner or as a venue, first thing that you ask if someone comes in, and normally this is going to be on the day of, hopefully you've heard about it before then, but a lot of times this is on the day of, ask them for their license. It's all electronic now. It used to be that we had to carry a little paper card in our wallet. But now it's all electronic. So I have it on my phone and I can show you, this is my license. I have a binder that we carry, our crews carry, that will have a copy of the permit. That will, the fire marshal should be on site for the event, depending on the venue. Sometimes the fire marshals don't actually come on site. But they should at least have that piece of paper or an email from the fire marshal just saying that it's approved. Some of these littler towns that have volunteer fire departments, our permit is an email that says you're good. But but at least we have an email that says you're good. So make sure that they have at least those two things. And then, of course, their certificate of insurance. They have to carry at least $1 million of liability insurance in order to do the spark units legally in Texas. So make sure that they do have the certificate of insurance. You see a copy of it. Don't just take their word for it. But also that the client is listed, the venue is listed, the city is listed as an additional insured, which is all required as well.
So let's move on to weather. So in Texas, weather is unpredictable. We were talking about fire bans earlier. How do you handle unexpected weather conditions like wind, rain, heat on the day of the event?
So it depends on the weather condition. So legally in the state of Texas, we can't fire Aerial fireworks, definitely, but sometimes also sparkle fountain departures in over 25-mile-per-hour sustained winds. Our contract says 20 miles per hour. So if it gusts up to 60 and comes back down for enough time for us to shoot the show, we can shoot the show. But if it's more than 20 miles per hour sustained throughout a longer period of time, we cannot fire the show. Also, lightning in the area is one thing that pretty much will cut us off from firing the show. Rain? Actually, not so much. Obviously, you don't want it raining when you're watching fireworks because then you're getting wet as well. But we can actually wrap the product that we fire in trash bags and it will fire out of the trash bags. So as long as it's a lighter rain, well, and sometimes it's been a heavier rain when I fired fireworks shows as well, we can actually still shoot the show. It's going to be a little bit foggier than it normally, a little smokier than it normally would just because of the moisture in the air. But the firework show will still fire. And so we just tell people, as far as rain conditions, we tell people to be flexible. We will have some fire marshals that will cancel due to high winds or any weather conditions. And sometimes that happens the day before, sometimes that happens the day of. And if that happens, we have to deal with that with the client and the contracted, the information that's in the contract. But if we tell them that they just have to be flexible, sometimes they just have to be flexible. We've had people in the middle of dinner when we have a little break in the weather and we say, put your plates down and come out right now. You're watching a fireworks show. And if we can do that, we can do that. And at least they get their show that they wanted. As far as burn bans, let's talk about heat in Texas. Well, and snow, I mean, we hardly have snow, but we actually have a picture of one of our lead pyrotechnicians laying down in snow to fire a sparkle fountain departure. So snow does not affect us at all. But heat does. So burn bans do go into effect in the state of Texas normally around August. And they used to last till maybe September. Well, we just had 2 counties redo their burn ban just this week. So it is still continuing almost into November. Hopefully we will get some rain over Halloween and a few of our shows will be able to fire. But unfortunately at that point, we don't have a choice but to cancel the event. It's too dry. Even if the burn ban was lifted in some areas, we wouldn't want to shoot it anyway, just because of the safety concerns. However, if there is a burn ban in effect, like some of our cities or some of our counties will put in a 90-day burn ban. So even if we do have a flood of some sort, it was put in for 90 days. They're not going to take it out until that 90 days is over. And so at that point, we talk to the clients, we give them an option. If we haven't started working on the show, if we haven't started paying for permits and all of that, we do offer some sort of refund traditionally. But if it's too close to the show date when it goes under burn ban and we've already spent the money that we need to spend to get that show completed, then that also falls under our rain out clause in our contract as well. So it's just kind of one of those things. And unfortunately, clients always ask me like, well, what do you think? Well, it's not up to me. So I can't predict the weather, but also I can't predict what that fire marshal is going to think about that weather. So we've had some that it will rain once and they're like, that's good. We're going to lift the burn ban. And then we have others that say, no, it's rained for a whole week, but this burn ban was put in place until this date and it's going to be in place until that date.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on the fire marshal that's in that county.
I did a wedding, I think a week and a half ago, and there was a fire ban, I think the day before, and then that morning, I was like on the way to the wedding, and it had been lifted, so we can do the venue, we were doing hand sparklers for that wedding. But yeah, you gotta check that almost every day here in Texas around August and October now.
Yes. Well, and then we actually have one county here in the DFW area that's always under a burn ban. They
What
don't
is
lift
that?
it. It's Wise County actually, and they are consistently under a burn ban. They're kind of West Texas, Springtown, that Decatur, that kind of area.
Okay.
And but they will let us do certain effects, even though they're consistently under a burn ban. So again, it just kind of depends on that fire marshal and what they'll allow.
Okay. So we talked a lot about fireworks and all the special effects. Um, for couples, when they're thinking about special effects, what's the best tip to make it unforgettable? I mean, obviously,
So
it's such a display. Like, it's a lot of fun to watch. It could be a surprise, but what are some tips to make it unforgettable?
So anything can be unforgettable, first of all. We always ask people like bubble machines. Our bubble machines are a rental, and it's a $40 rental. And people will ask, well, will you only do that? Yes, we will only do that. So if you want something simple, or if your budget just doesn't allow for a firework display, we can offer the bubbles. We can offer our dancing on a cloud effect. We can offer our confetti cannons that are a little bit on the less expensive side because they don't require the permits and fire marshal fees and all of that that goes into pyrotechnics. But it's also a super fun effect. It makes your wedding memorable. It makes your event memorable. It's something different that people don't see at every event. And even though us in the wedding industry and the events industry, we're kind of jaded with what we've seen, and it's kind of like, oh, that again, but for these people that are wedding guests, that are, doctors and lawyers and accountants and whatever they do for a living, they've never seen a bubble machine. Something as simple as that. They've never seen it. They think it's super fun. And especially, of course, aerial fireworks, indoor pyrotechnics. We always get the oohs and ahs, even with the indoor pyrotechnic displays. So have that thing that, if even if there's something outlandish, out of the box. I actually worked a wedding where they had not a face painter, but they were putting like jewels on the people's faces. And I thought it was so odd. Just at a wedding. I mean, I could see like at a carnival or at a kid's birthday party, but this is what they wanted. And this was what was special to them, and it meant something to them. So if you have something that could be outlandish and out of the box. I mean, I've seen at conferences, they'll do a tattoo artist
Yeah.
where they'll actually be in the corner actually giving people tattoos. So random, but if that's special to you and it has some sort of meaning to you and your friends and your family and your spouse that you're about to spend the rest of your life with, have that thing. And again, it could be super simple, but to other people who don't see it every day, it's the coolest thing they've ever seen in their lives.
Exactly.
So just do it. As my advice is, just do it. Whatever you want to do. It's your day, and just make it special. No matter what your family thinks.
So, speaking of unique, what are some weird or odd requests that you've had? And I'm sure you have many.
Yeah, there's been a lot. So we did have well, we've had surprises, of course. Like I mentioned earlier, the Epcot wedding, where they wanted the Epcot fireworks show. We have things like that as far as for weddings. Corporate events are a whole other ball of candy. We've exploded the DeLorean for a Back to the Future event. We've had volcanoes explode. We've had a CEO come in and shoot down the competition. So corporate events, they like their themes. Weddings, few and far between that we have something different and special. Um, but and like I said earlier, with our Van Meter wedding this weekend, and we had one that was like Xavier or something, and we made the V and X. So we put in little touches if we can, that maybe they pay attention to and maybe they don't. But the one the one odd request that I'll mention that we can't do was a corporate event, and they had the indoor spark units. And I always tell people they pop a few times. I don't really give a number. I mean, they can pop probably 6 to 7 times without having to be refilled, depending on the timing of the pop. But I told them they pop a few times. Well, to them, a few meant 3. They were getting 3 pops. And that evening, they used 2 of them. So they actually asked us if we could come back the next day and do the other one. No, we cannot come back the next day, because there's permits that go into it and crews and all of the things, and you will be charged for a whole new show for that one pop. So so that's probably the weirdest question I've gotten. But we love it when people want something new or something different. We had one couple who graduated from Baylor. So they did the fireworks show to some lovey-dovey Sky Full of Stars or some sort of song. And then the last minute, which was the finale, was the Baylor fight song. And the entire show was green and gold. So, whenever you want to roll something in that's different and new and special to y'all, again, I'm all here for it.
So fun. Do you have any other stories that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, and I was going to say, changing on the fly also, we talked about weather conditions, of course, and there's certain things like departures, if we have a bunch of cars parked or something like that. If the fire marshal will let us, again, we're at the mercy of the fire marshal, but if the fire marshal will let us make changes to accommodate not having to move 20 cars, we are definitely flexible and on the fly. But we had a couple one time that had called an Uber. They were using Uber Black. Their planner had reserved it weeks in advance. It was all set to go. We were in the parking lot. We had set up the departure. The planner was on her phone looking at the Uber. You know how you can see the little car drive. So she's watching the little car drive on the map. And we're out in the middle of nowhere. So it's really, really dark. And we see the car and their lights come into the parking lot and then turn around and leave the parking lot. We're not really sure why, because he was all the way out there. So why not pick up the people you were supposed to pick up? But he came in, he left, and on her app, it said, your Uber is no longer available. So she tried and tried and tried and tried and tried to rebook an Uber. Couples do not use Uber. Tried to rebook an Uber, and she could not get anyone to come out there. So no one had a cute truck, car, something that they could drive through just for pictures. So our couple walked through it. So they walked down and they danced and they kissed and they dipped and they did all the things. And it was great. And they had great pictures, and it stopped and they got in somebody's car, and that somebody took them to the hotel. So so if you need to be flexible, just remember on your wedding day, I know you don't want, you want it to be perfect. You don't want these changes to occur, but you have the rest of your life to be married. This is your one wedding day. Just let it roll.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Ubers are tricky for a Grand X car, especially out in Texas. You could be 40 minutes away from the nearest city and you're still at a wedding venue. So, yeah, work with your planner on that. But I love that couple pivoted and they're like, sure, let's walk through this. I'm sure it made beautiful photos.
Yeah, it was super fun. So you never know what's going to happen, but we try to do our best if there is any changes that need to happen on the fly to have those happen and have it be flawless for the couple as well.
Amazing. Well, I feel like I've learned so much about what you do. And obviously, there's so much involved behind the scenes that couples don't see. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with us and be on our podcast. Can you share with listeners how they can find you?
So our website is www.pyrotex, and that's Pyrotex, like Pyrotexas.com. And I'm Paige Mejia. All of my information is on our website, and all of our social media is at Pyrotex US, because there is a Pyrotex in the UK that got to that first. But all of our social media is Pyrotex US. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram. I think I might have done one video on TikTok because I am the older generation. But we're somewhere there too. But yes, and you can see videos on our YouTube channel as well of shows that we've done in the past, and just kind of get a different idea of different things that you can have for your event.
Love it. Well, thank you again, Paige. I'll probably see you. We'll definitely see you in December at an upcoming wedding, but around town at local networking events and possibly another wedding in between. Thank you again. And thank you, listeners. You can find us on obviously our podcast, Instagram, our website, Facebook. We'll see you next time.